The text that shattered everything. Rachel Morrison stared at her phone screen, reading the message for the third time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something different. They did not. I can't do this anymore. Don't call me. It's over. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the phone tighter, standing in the middle of Terminal C at Boston Logan International Airport. Around her, travelers rushed past with rolling suitcases. Families hugged goodbye, couples kissed before separating at security. The world kept moving while hers had just stopped. She had been with Tyler for 3 years. 3 years of excuses, of last-minute cancellations, of promises that next month would be better, that next year they would finally take that trip together. And now, 20 minutes before her flight to Portland for her sister's wedding, he had ended it with a text message. Rachel's chest felt tight. She could not breathe properly. The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright, the announcements over the loudspeaker too loud. She stumbled toward the nearest row of seats and collapsed into one, pressing her palm against her forehead. Stupid, she whispered to herself. So incredibly stupid, she should have seen it coming. The way Tyler had stopped asking about her day. The way he always had an excuse when she suggested spending weekends together. The way his eyes never quite met hers anymore when he said he loved her. Her sister Amanda had warned her. He's not treating you right. Ratch, you deserve someone who actually shows up. But Rachel had defended him, made excuses. Convinced herself that love meant being patient. Now she sat alone in an airport. Her bridesmaid dress packed in her carry-on, mascara probably running down her cheeks. Feeling like the biggest fool in Massachusetts, the stranger who changed everything, Rachel, was wiping her eyes with the back of her hand when she heard a sound that made her look up. A man, maybe 15 feet away, had doubled over, clutching his chest. He was tall, dressed in an expensive-looking dark coat, his salt and pepper hair slightly disheveled. For a moment, nobody seemed to notice him. Then he collapsed. Rachel's training kicked in instantly. She had taken CPR courses as part of her teaching certification, had renewed them every 2 years. Without thinking, she dropped her bag and rushed over, dropping to her knees beside him. Sir, can you hear me? She checked his pulse. It was there, but irregular. Someone call 911? The man's eyes fluttered open. They were a striking hazel color, and even in his distress there was an intensity to them. No, he managed to say, his voice strained. No hospital, please. You just collapsed. You need medical attention. I know what I need. He struggled to sit up, and Rachel helped support him, her arm around his shoulders. I just need a moment, please. Airport security and medical personnel arrived within minutes. Rachel stepped back, expecting to be dismissed. But the man kept his eyes on her even as paramedics checked his vitals. When they tried to insist on taking him to the hospital, he refused firmly, pulling out a card from his wallet and handing it to them. Rachel caught a glimpse of it. Some kind of medical directive. The paramedics exchanged glances, then reluctantly agreed to let him refuse transport, making him sign a waiver. As the crowd dispersed, and the man slowly got to his feet with the help of a cane Rachel had not noticed before. He turned to her. Thank you, he said quietly. You didn't have to help. Anyone would have, but you did. He extended his hand. James Holland. Rachel shook it, noting how warm his palm was despite the paleness of his face. Rachel Morrison. Rachel. He said her name like he was testing how it sounded. Can I buy you a coffee? As thanks. She glanced at the departures board. Her flight did not leave for another 90 minutes. And honestly, what was waiting for her? A wedding where everyone would ask about Tyler. Sympathetic looks from her family. The suffocating reminder that she was, once again, alone. Sure, she heard herself say, coffee sounds good. The confession that changed her life. They found a quiet corner in one of the airport lounges. James had some kind of membership that got them in, and Rachel felt out of place among the business travelers and frequent flyers. But James did not seem to notice or care. He ordered 2 coffees and settled into the chair across from her, studying her with those intense hazel eyes. You've been crying, he observed. Rachel's hand automatically went to her face. That obvious? Only because I've learned to notice details. Bad flight or bad day? bad relationship. Well, bad ending to a bad relationship. She did not know why she was telling him this. Maybe because he was a stranger. Maybe because after Tyler's text, she did not have any dignity left to protect. Got dumped via text about 30 minutes ago. James winced. Ouch. That's cowardly. Yeah. Rachel took a sip of coffee. It was good. Much better than the usual airport offerings. I should have seen it coming. Everyone else did. Love makes us blind sometimes. Are you speaking from experience? I used to be. Now, I see everything too clearly. There was something dark in his tone, something final. He set down his cup and leaned forward slightly. Rachel, can I ask you something strange? After the day I've had, strange sounds refreshing. How do you feel about Iceland? Rachel blinked. Iceland. The country. I'm flying there tonight. Private plane. There's a chance to see the Northern Lights this week. It's something I've always wanted to see. He paused, and in that pause, Rachel sensed a weight to his words she could not quite understand yet. Come with me, she laughed. But it died quickly when she realized he was serious. You're inviting a stranger to fly to Iceland with you. I'm inviting someone who helped me when I needed it. Someone who looks like she could use an adventure instead of whatever she's flying toward. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather notebook, placing it on the table between them. I have a list of things I want to do. 28 days worth of experiences. I was planning to do them alone, but after meeting you, I think maybe I don't want to be alone anymore. 28 days? That's specific. James met her eyes directly. I have stage 4 heart failure, Rachel. The doctors gave me a month, maybe 6 weeks at best. I've declined aggressive treatment. I'd rather spend my remaining time living than dying slowly in a hospital bed. His voice was steady, matter of fact, but Rachel could hear the grief underneath it. I know this sounds insane. You don't know me, but I'm asking anyway. Come with me. See the Northern Lights. No expectations. Separate rooms. You can leave whenever you want. But if you stay, I promise you'll experience things you never imagined.
Ow.
Rachel's heart was pounding. This was crazy. Absolutely crazy. You did not just fly to Iceland with a stranger, even if that stranger had kind eyes and was apparently dying. You did not abandon your sister's wedding for some wild adventure with a man. You met 20 minutes ago, but then she thought about Tyler's text. About going back to her empty apartment? About the life she had been living, always playing it safe, always being responsible. And where had that gotten her? Separate rooms. She asked quietly, I give you my word, and I can leave any time. I'll buy you a return ticket right now if you want. Rachel looked down at the leather notebook. What's on your list? James opened it, and she saw neat handwriting filling the pages. Northern Lights in Iceland. Midnight sun in Norway. Street food tours in Thailand. Sunrise at Angkor Wat. Watch cherry blossoms in Kyoto. Swim in the Amalfi Coast. Dance in the rain. Tell someone the truth. Fall in love one last time. That last item made her throat tight. She looked back at James. This man was dying. He had weeks left, and he wanted to spend them chasing experiences instead of sitting in a hospital. There was something beautiful and terrible about that, and suddenly, Rachel knew her answer. Okay, she whispered. I'll come with you. James's face transformed. The weariness lifted for just a moment, replaced by something like hope. Really? Really? But I need to call my sister first and explain why I'm missing her wedding. Of course. James pulled out his phone. Take all the time you need. The plane doesn't leave for 2 hours. Rachel stood up, her legs slightly shaky, and walked to a quiet corner of the lounge. She dialed Amanda's number, her heart racing. Wretch. Are you at the gate? I can't wait to see you. Amanda, I need to tell you something, and I need you not to freak out. There was a pause. What did Tyler do? He dumped me. Via text. That absolute piece of garbage. Are you okay? Do you want me to come get you? No, actually I'm going to Iceland. You're what? I met someone at the airport. He's sick. Really sick. And he's invited me to travel with him for a few weeks. I know it sounds insane, but I'm going to do it. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Amanda's voice came back, softer. Are you safe? Do you trust this person? Rachel looked across the lounge at James, who was staring out the window at the plains, his hand unconsciously resting over his heart. Yeah, she said slowly. I think I do. Tyler never deserved you anyway. Go have your adventure. But text me every single day, or I'm calling the FBI. Rachel laughed, tears suddenly streaming down her face again. But this time, they were not from heartbreak. They were from something else entirely. Something that felt like freedom. I love you, Amanda. Love you too. Now go see those northern lights. Rachel hung up and walked back to James. He looked up at her, a question in his eyes. Let's go, she said simply. James smiled, really smiled, and it changed his whole face. He stood up, offering her his arm. Then let's not waste another minute. As they walked toward the private terminal, Rachel felt the weight of her old life falling away. She did not know what the next 28 days would bring. She did not know if this was the bravest or stupidest thing she had ever done. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt alive. The sky on fire, the private jet, was smaller than Rachel had imagined, but far more luxurious than anything she had ever experienced. Cream leather seats, polished wood accents, and windows that seemed impossibly large. James had settled into a seat across from her, his notebook open on the small table between them. Have you ever seen the northern lights? He asked as the plane lifted into the night sky. Rachel shook her head. I've barely left Massachusetts. A few trips to New York, one college spring break in Florida. That's about it. Then this will be special. He flipped through his notebook. I've read that the Icelanders call them the dance of the spirits. Vikings thought they were reflections from the shields of the Valkyries. You believe in that stuff? Spirits and mythology? James looked up at her, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. When you know your time is limited, you start believing in the magic of things. The alternative is too dark. Rachel wanted to ask more about his condition, about why he had chosen this path instead of treatment, but she sensed it was too soon. Instead, she asked, what made you create this list? He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the edge of the notebook. I spent 15 years building a tech company. 16-hour days, sleeping in my office, missing birthdays and holidays. I told myself it would be worth it once we went public. And we did. I made more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. He looked out the window at the darkness below. Then I collapsed during a board meeting 6 weeks ago. The doctors ran every test imaginable. Stage 4 heart failure, likely from years of stress and ignoring warning signs. By the time they caught it, it was too late for anything but palliative care. I'm so sorry, Opie. I did it to myself. His voice was matter-of-fact, but Rachel heard the regret underneath. I woke up in that hospital bed and realized I had built an empire but never actually lived. Never watched a sunrise without checking my phone. Never traveled just to travel. Never let myself fall in love because it seemed like a distraction from success. He tapped the notebook. So I made this list. Every experience I denied myself while I was busy being important. I have 28 days to live them all. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. 28 days seems cruel. 28 days is a gift if you use them right. The flight attendant brought them dinner. Some kind of perfectly prepared salmon with roasted vegetables, but Rachel could barely taste it. Her mind was spinning. 12 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether Tyler would like her dress at the wedding. Now, she was flying over the Atlantic. The ocean with a dying millionaire heading toward the northern lights. James noticed her picking at her food. Having second thoughts? Just processing. This morning I was a third-grade teacher worried about lesson plans. Now, I'm on a private jet to Iceland. You teach third grade? Something in his face softened. That must be wonderful. Working with kids? It is. They're honest in a way adults forget how to be. If they like you, they tell you. If they're sad, they cry. They don't hide behind text messages or excuses. James caught the bitterness in her tone. Tell me about him. The one who sent the text? Rachel sighed. Tyler, we dated for 3 years. He was always busy, always had something more important to do. I kept thinking if I was patient enough, supportive enough, he'd eventually make me a priority. She laughed without humor. Turns out I was just convenient until something better came along. His loss. Everyone keeps saying that. But it doesn't feel like his loss. It feels like mine. James leaned forward, his hazel eyes intense. Rachel, I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me 20 years ago. Your time is the most valuable thing you have. Not money, not status, not other people's approval. Time. And anyone who wastes your time doesn't deserve a single second more of it. The conviction in his voice struck something deep in Rachel's chest. Here was a man who literally could count his remaining days. And he was telling her not to waste hers, grieving someone who had never valued them. How are you so calm about all this? She asked quietly.
About dying?
I'm not calm. I'm terrified. His admission was raw, honest. Every morning I wake up wondering if this is the last time I'll see the sunrise. Every night I lie awake feeling my heartbeat, counting each one like borrowed coins. But being terrified and being paralyzed are different things. I refuse to spend my last days frozen in fear. The plane began its descent into Reykjavik as dawn broke over Iceland. Through the window, Rachel could see a landscape that looked like another planet. Black volcanic rock, patches of snow, steam rising from geothermal vents. It was beautiful and alien and absolutely nothing like Boston. Under the Arctic sky, they landed in the early morning darkness. Iceland in late autumn meant only a few hours of weak daylight, but James had planned for this. He had arranged for a guide named Bjorn, a cheerful Icelander with a thick beard and a modified jeep built for the rough terrain. The forecast is good tonight, Bjorn told them as they drove north from Reykjavik. Clear skies, strong solar activity. If the lights come, they will be spectacular. Rachel stared out the window at the passing landscape. Fields of lava rock covered in moss, mountains sharp against the sky, occasional farms with brightly colored roofs. Everything felt dreamlike, as if she had stepped through a door into a different world. They stopped at a small guest house on the edge of a fjord. True to his word, James had booked separate rooms. Rachel's was simple but cozy, with a view of the water and mountains beyond. She stood at the window, still unable to believe where she was. A knock on her door. James stood there, wrapped in a heavy coat. Bjorn says the lights might start in an hour. Want to get ready? They bundled into thermal layers and followed Bjorn to a remote spot away from any light pollution. The cold was intense, biting through even the thick clothing. Rachel's breath came out in white clouds. Above them, the sky was impossibly clear, stars scattered like diamonds across black velvet. Now we wait, Bjorn said, setting up a thermos of coffee. The lights, they come when they want to come. You cannot force them. They stood in the cold darkness, sipping coffee, watching the sky. Rachel found herself standing close to James, drawn by his warmth and something else she could not quite name. He did not seem to mind. Tell me something about yourself that nobody knows, James said suddenly. Rachel thought about it. I wanted to be a writer when I was young. I wrote stories all the time, filled notebooks with them. But everyone said teaching was more practical, more secure. So I put the stories away and got my education degree. Do you regret it? Sometimes, when I'm reading to my students and I see their faces light up at a good story, I wonder what stories I might have told if I'd been braver. It's not too late. It's maybe not for you to say. You've already built your empire. You took your shot, and look where it got me. His voice was quiet but firm. Rachel, I'm standing here at 47 years old with a month to live, and I have nothing that matters. No family, no love, no memories that make me smile. I have money in accounts I'll never spend and buildings with my name on them that I'll never see again. You have students who love you. You have stories still inside you waiting to be written. Don't measure your life against mine. I'm not the success story. I'm the cautionary tale. Before Rachel could respond, Bjorn suddenly pointed at the sky. There, it begins. At first, it was just a faint green glow on the horizon, barely distinguishable from a distant city's light pollution. But then it grew stronger, reaching up like ghostly fingers into the darkness. Within minutes, the entire northern sky was alive with light. Curtains of green and blue danced across the stars, shifting and swirling in patterns that seemed almost alive. Occasionally, streaks of pink and purple would flash through the display. The lights moved like waves, like breath, like something with a heartbeat of its own. Rachel forgot about the cold. She forgot about Tyler, about Boston, about everything except the impossible beauty unfolding above her. Tears froze on her cheeks. "My God," she whispered. "James, this is—" She turned to look at him and stopped. James was crying too, his face tilted up to the lights. The expression on his face was one of pure wonder, mixed with devastating sadness. He was watching something he had waited his whole life to see, and he was watching it knowing it might be one of the last beautiful things he would ever witness. Without thinking, Rachel reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately. Holding tight, they stood like that for over an hour, hands clasped, watching the sky dance. Neither of them spoke. Words would have cheapened it somehow. This was a moment beyond language, beyond the normal boundaries of strangers and propriety. Two people standing under the aurora, holding on to each other, and the fleeting magic of being alive. When the lights finally faded and the stars returned to their normal stillness, Bjorn packed up his gear quietly, giving them space. Rachel and James walked slowly back to the Jeep, still not speaking. At the guest house, James paused outside her door. "Thank you for being here tonight. For sharing that with me. I should be thanking you. I never would have seen something like that on my own. Maybe we both needed it." He looked like he wanted to say more but stopped himself. Instead, he squeezed her hand once and let go. "Good night, Rachel. Good night, James." She lay in bed afterward, still feeling the phantom warmth of his hand in hers, still seeing the lights when she closed her eyes. Something had shifted between them under that aurora. A connection had formed that went deeper than gratitude or convenience. And that terrified her, because James was dying. In less than 4 weeks, he would be gone. And Rachel had just escaped one heartbreak. The last thing she needed was to walk straight into another one that would hurt infinitely worse. But even as she told herself to be careful, to guard her heart, she knew it was already too late. She was falling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Cherry blossoms and confessions 3 days later. They were in Kyoto. The transition from Iceland's stark beauty to Japan's delicate refinement was jarring. One moment they had been surrounded by volcanic rock and geothermal steam. The next they were walking through gardens where every tree, every stone, every pool of water seemed perfectly placed. James's notebook had several items for Japan. Street food in Tokyo, watching sumo wrestlers train, visiting ancient temples. But the one that had brought them to Kyoto specifically was cherry blossoms. "I know it's not the right season," James admitted as they walked through Maruyama Park. "Cherry blossoms are a spring thing, but there's a few late-blooming varieties that flower in autumn. I read about them in a magazine once, years ago, and thought they sounded magical. Flowers blooming when they're supposed to be dying." Rachel understood the metaphor he was not quite saying. They found a small grove where pale pink blossoms still clung to branches, petals occasionally drifting down like snow. Lanterns hung from the trees, and a handful of locals sat on blankets, sharing sake and conversation. James had arranged for them to do the same. A blanket, a basket with Japanese food Rachel could not identify, but that tasted incredible, and warm sake in small ceramic cups. 2 unexpected adventures, James said. Raising his cup, Rachel clinked hers against his. To borrowed time, dancing better. He smiled at the reference to his own words. They drank, and the sake burned warmly down Rachel's throat. "Can I ask you something personal?" Rachel said after a moment. "After Iceland, I think we're past formality. Why no treatment? I've been researching heart failure. There are surgeries, transplants, medications. Why choose this instead?" James set down his cup, his expression growing distant. "They wanted to do a transplant. Put me on a list, wait for someone else to die so I could maybe live a few more years. But the odds weren't good. 70% chance I'd die during or right after surgery. And even if I survived, the recovery would take months. I'd be in a hospital bed, hooked to machines, unable to leave, unable to do anything except wait and hope. He looked at her directly. I chose quality over quantity. For weeks of really living over 4 months of just surviving. But what if the surgery worked? What if you had years instead of weeks? Rachel, I'm not 25. I'm 47. I've lived a life, just not a very good one. The idea of spending my last days fighting for a few more that would probably be spent in recovery rooms and follow-up appointments, it felt like dying slowly instead of living quickly. He reached for her hand. Does that make sense? Rachel wanted to argue. The teacher in her, the part that had taken CPR training and first aid courses, rebelled against the idea of giving up. But looking at his face, at the peace in his decision, despite the fear underneath it, she understood. It makes sense, she said quietly. I don't like it, but it makes sense. I didn't expect to meet you, James said, and there was something new in his voice. When I made this list, I planned to do it alone. But having you here, sharing these moments, it's made everything more vivid, more real. I'm grateful for that. And I'm sorry. Sorry for what? For making you care about someone who's going to leave? His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I see the way you look at me, and I feel it too. But this has an expiration date, and I hate that I'm going to hurt you. Rachel's heart was pounding. She should pull her hand away. She should create distance. Instead, she held tighter. Then let's make it worth the hurt. James's eyes widened slightly. Rachel, I know this ends. I've known it from the beginning, but I'm here anyway. So stop apologizing for dying and just live with me. However many days we have, let's make them matter. For a long moment, James just stared at her. Then, slowly, he leaned forward. Rachel met him halfway. Their lips touched softly at first, tentative, questioning, then deeper, with sudden urgency, as if they were both trying to press as much feeling as possible into a single kiss. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. A cherry blossom petal had landed in Rachel's hair. James reached up and gently brushed it away, his hand lingering against her cheek. I'm falling in love with you, he whispered. And I don't have the right to. I'm falling too. And I don't care about rights or time limits anymore. Rachel pressed her forehead against his. Love me while you're here. Let me love you back. That's all I'm asking. James kissed her again. And this time, it tasted like sake and cherry blossoms and promises they both knew were temporary, but chose to make anyway. The blue waters of Amalfi 2 weeks into their journey. They reached the Amalfi coast. The Mediterranean stretched impossibly blue, dotted with boats. Colorful buildings clung to cliffs, connected by winding roads and ancient staircases. Lemon trees grew everywhere, their fruit bright yellow against the green leaves. James had rented a small villa overlooking the water. It had a terrace with a view that seemed to stretch forever. A kitchen that smelled like olive oil and herbs, and for the first time, just one bedroom. They had stopped pretending in Kyoto. The separate rooms had become a polite fiction. They would say goodnight at their respective doors. Then Rachel would wait 5 minutes before quietly crossing the hall to where James waited, or sometimes he would come to her. They would lie together in the darkness, talking until exhaustion claimed them. His heart beat uneven under her ear. But here, in this villa with the sea breeze carrying the scent of salt and lemons, they had one room and one bed and no more pretense between them. Rachel stood on the terrace at sunset, watching the sky turn orange and pink. She felt James's arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. This is the one I was most looking forward to, he murmured. Swimming in the Mediterranean was something I'd dreamed about since I was a kid. Reading adventure books. Then let's do it. Now, they changed into swimsuits and walked down a steep path to a small private beach. The water was cooler than Rachel expected, but not uncomfortable. They waded in together, gasping and laughing at the temperature, until they were deep enough to swim. James was not a strong swimmer. His illness had weakened him, and Rachel could see the effort it took him to stay afloat. But his face was lit with pure joy. I'm in the Mediterranean Sea, he said, wonder in his voice. I'm actually here. Rachel swam close to him, close enough that she could help if he needed it. But he seemed determined to do this himself. He floated on his back, staring up at the darkening sky, and Rachel saw tears mixing with the salt water on his face. Are you okay? She asked, concerned. I'm perfect. God, Rachel, I'm so utterly perfect right now. His voice cracked. I just wish I had more time. More days like this. More sunsets with you. Rachel's throat tightened painfully. She swam to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. Their legs tangled together as they trod water, holding each other afloat. We have tonight, she whispered against his ear. We have right now. That's enough. It has to be enough. They kissed in the water as the last light faded from the sky. Stars began to appear overhead. Somewhere on the cliffs above, music drifted down from a restaurant. The world felt infinite and impossibly small at the same time. The morning everything changed. Rachel woke to find James's side of the bed empty. Sunlight streamed through the white curtains of their Amalfi villa, and for a moment she just lay there, listening to the distant sound of waves. Then she heard it. Coughing from the bathroom, harsh and desperate. She was on her feet immediately, crossing the room in seconds. Through the door, she could hear James gasping between coughs. James? I'm coming in. She found him, bent over the sink, one hand gripping the porcelain edge, the other pressed against his chest. His face was gray, sweat beading on his forehead. When he looked up at her reflection in the mirror, she saw fear. It's getting worse, he said, his voice rough, faster than they predicted. Rachel grabbed a towel, wetting it with cool water and pressing it against his forehead. How long has it been this bad? The last few days? I didn't want to tell you. Didn't want to ruin this, James? Her voice was sharp. We talked about this. No hiding. Not from me. He nodded weakly, letting her help him to a chair. His breathing was labored, his lips slightly blue. Rachel's nursing instinct was screaming at her. This was not just fatigue. This was his heart failing in real time. We need to get you to a hospital, now. No, we talked about this too. No hospitals unless absolutely necessary. This is absolutely necessary. Look at you. She knelt in front of him, taking his hands. They were cold despite the warm morning. Please, James. Let me get you help. He looked at her for a long moment, and she watched the internal battle play out across his face. Pride versus pragmatism. His plan versus reality. Finally, he nodded once. Okay, but just for evaluation. I'm not staying. Rachel made calls while throwing on clothes. Within an hour, they were at a private hospital in Salerno, where a doctor who spoke excellent English examined James thoroughly. Rachel paced in the waiting room, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was grave. Miss Morrison, Mr. Holland is asking for you. She found James in a sterile white room, hooked to monitors that beeped steadily. He looked diminished somehow, as if the hospital had already started taking pieces of him. Tell me, Rachel said, sitting in the chair beside his bed. My heart is deteriorating faster than expected. Dr. Ritchie says I have maybe a week, possibly 2. His voice was flat, controlled. Unless I consider surgery. What kind of surgery? There's a procedure. Experimental. They've been developing it at a research hospital in Switzerland. It's not a transplant, more like a repair combined with mechanical support. The success rate is about 50-50. Rachel's mind was already working through the numbers. 50% chance of survival was better than 0%. So you'd have a real chance of living? A chance at extending my life, yes. But the recovery is brutal. Months, maybe longer. And there's a significant chance I'd die on the table or shortly after. He reached for her hand. I'd be trading my last week or 2 of freedom for a gamble that might win me more time or might kill me faster. How much time? Years, potentially. The procedure is designed to stabilize the heart long term, not just temporarily extend things. Rachel felt her heart pounding. Years, not weeks, not months. Actual years. Then you have to try. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. She squeezed his hand tighter. James, I know you made peace with dying. I know you chose this path because you wanted control. But things have changed. We've changed. Don't you want more time? More mornings waking up together? More sunsets and cities and moments? His eyes glistened. Of course I do. God, Rachel, of course I do. But what if I die on that table? What if the last memory you have of me is in a surgical suite, not under the northern lights or swimming in the Mediterranean? Then that's my memory to carry. But if there's a chance, any chance, that I get to keep you longer, we have to take it. Her voice broke. I can't watch you give up when there's still hope. I love you too much for that. James closed his eyes, tears sliding down his cheeks. I love you too. That's why this is so hard. I didn't want to love anyone. I didn't want to leave someone behind who would grieve me. But then you walked into my dying, and now I can't imagine leaving you. Rachel climbed onto the hospital bed beside him, careful of the wires and tubes, and pressed her face against his shoulder. Then fight. Not for you. Fight for us. For the chance at more time together. For a long time, James just held her, his heart beat irregular under her ear. Finally, he whispered, Okay, I'll do it. I'll try. The wait the Swiss hospital was state-of-the-art, all glass and steel perched on a mountainside. They had transferred James there within 48 hours, and Rachel had not left his side. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. James's hospital room overlooked the Alps, snow-capped peaks glowing in the afternoon sun. He stood at the window, dressed in the hospital gown, his notebook open in his hands. I never finished the list, he said quietly. 28 days, and I made it to day 19. 9 items left uncrossed. Rachel came to stand beside him. Which ones? He showed her. Dance in the rain. Watch a sunrise from a mountaintop. Tell someone the truth. Fall in love for real. Learn to let go. You fell in love, Rachel said, touching that line. We can cross that one off. Not until you say it back. Out loud. No implications or kisses that say it without words. I need to hear it. Rachel looked up at him, at this man who had stumbled into her life at the worst possible moment and somehow become everything. I love you, James Holland. I love you completely. I love you despite the fear and because of the fear. I love you for teaching me that time is precious. I love you for inviting me into your dying and showing me how to really live. James cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Then we can cross that one off. He kissed her softly. If I don't make it tomorrow, you will. But if I don't, I need you to promise me something. Finish the list. Do the things I didn't get to do. Dance in the rain. Watch that sunrise. And then go home and write your stories. Don't let my death make you afraid to live. James, stop talking like you're already gone. Being realistic. But I'm also being hopeful. Because I want to wake up from that surgery. I want to be the one who dances with you in the rain and watches you write your first book. I want years with you, Rachel. But if I don't get them, I need to know you'll still have your years. Promise me. Rachel nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. That night, they lay together in the narrow hospital bed. Rachel tucked against his side, listening to his heartbeat. She did not sleep. She counted each beat, memorizing the rhythm. Terrified that if she closed her eyes, she would miss something important. The surgery morning came too fast and too slow. Nurses arrived to prep James, checking his vitals and IVs. Rachel held his hand until the last possible second, walking beside the gurney as they wheeled him toward the operating room at the doors. She had to let go. James looked up at her, and despite his fear, he smiled. See you on the other side. You better. I'm not finishing that list alone. Then he was gone, swallowed by the surgical suite's bright lights. Rachel stood frozen in the hallway until a nurse gently guided her. To the waiting room, the surgery was supposed to take 6 to 8 hours. Rachel sat in the same chair the entire time, unable to eat, unable to focus on anything except the clock. Other families came and went, receiving news good and bad. She watched a woman collapse in relief when her husband's surgery was successful. She watched a man break down, sobbing when the doctor shook his head. She wondered which one she would be. Hour 5 passed. Hour 6. At hour 7, Rachel started praying even though she had not prayed since childhood. She made bargains with God, with the universe, with anyone who might be listening. Take anything else. Just let him live. At hour 8, the surgeon emerged. Rachel leaped to her feet, her heart in her throat. The surgeon pulled down his mask, and Rachel searched his face desperately for clues. He looked exhausted, Miss Morrison. The surgery went longer than expected. There were complications, and for a while we were not sure he would make it. Rachel felt her knees starting to buckle, but he did. He made it through. The next 48 hours are critical, but he's alive, and the procedure was successful. Rachel collapsed back into the chair, gasping for air. Alive. He was alive. When can I see him? He's in recovery now. Another hour, and we'll move him to ICU. You can see him then, but he'll be unconscious for a while. The anesthesia and trauma to his body will keep him under probably through tomorrow.
How did?
Rachel nodded, barely hearing the rest of the doctor's words. James was alive. That was all that mattered. The beginning after the end, 3 months later. Rachel stood in front of her third-grade class, reading from a book. Not a published book, her book. The one she had finally written. The story of a teacher who learned to live from a man learning to die. The kids were rapt, listening to her describe the northern lights and cherry blossoms and swimming in the Mediterranean. When she finished the chapter, they erupted into applause and questions. Did they get married? Is he okay now? Can you read more? Rachel smiled. How about we finish it tomorrow? But yes, he's okay. He's more than okay. After school, she walked to the coffee shop, 2 blocks from her apartment. James was already there, sitting at their usual table by the window, 2 cups of coffee waiting. He looked different from the man she had met at the airport. Healthier, with color in his cheeks and steadiness in his movements. But his eyes were the same. That intense hazel gaze that had first pulled her in. How was school? He asked as she sat down. They loved chapter 12. Begged me to keep reading. You going to tell them how it really ends? Rachel leaned across the table and kissed him. I'm still writing the ending. We both are. James smiled and pulled out his old notebook. Most of the items were crossed off now, but he had added new ones. Marry Rachel, grow old together. Never stop being grateful. I have a surprise, he said, pulling out 2 tickets. Remember what we never got to do? Dancing in the rain? Rachel raised an eyebrow. It's January. In Boston, there's 3 feet of snow outside, so we'll dance in the snow instead. Come on, he stood, offering his hand. Borrowed time dances better. But earned time dances best. They bundled into coats and walked to Boston Common. Snow was falling steadily, blanketing everything in white. The park was nearly empty, just a few brave souls walking dogs or cutting through. James found a clear spot near the frog pond and pulled out his phone. Starting a playlist? Music drifted from the tiny speaker, barely audible over the wind. But it was enough. James held out his hand, and Rachel took it, letting him pull her close. They danced in the falling snow, clumsy and cold and absolutely perfect. Other people stopped to watch, smiling at the couple swaying together. Some probably thought they were newlyweds. Others might have seen the scars barely visible at James's collar and understood something deeper. Rachel pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. It was not perfect. The surgery had left damage that would never fully heal, but it was steady. It was here, and that was everything. I love you, James whispered against her hair. Thank you for making me fight. I love you too. Thank you for teaching me that endings don't have to be the end. They kept dancing as the snow fell around them. 2 people who had found each other at the worst possible moment and chosen to turn it into the best possible beginning. Above them, the sky was gray with winter storms, but to Rachel and James it looked exactly like hope.